Modified Frame-in-Frame Composition by Doris Charest. I call this a frame-in-frame composition, but it's modified. It's just 4 different sized rectangles. And like all great abstracts, it starts with a sketch. So I want one dark side at the bottom and one dark side at the top, and then I want to add color in the other sections. So just shade it to show that you want some dark there. When I rub, my table moves and my camera moves with my table. Sorry about that. And I want to add something else. I want to add some marks near where those 4 rectangles join. So I'm just going to draw it like this and see what happens. Keep in mind that sometimes a great idea on paper is different on canvas. And I just want to make sure that I have a plan before I actually start. And I want to add some textures in the other parts. That's what those scribbles are. But I have a plan. So I take a chalk and I divide my canvas. I want not 4 even squares, but 4 uneven squares. I like a chalk because it's easy to erase and it's easy to paint over. So I'm going to start with white. I'll put white in 2 of the rectangles and I'll have darks on the other rectangles. So this is just white paint and it's pretty wet, and I just add it and cover that black up. I'm not that careful, but because I'm going to add a texture to it. If I wanted a nice flat surface, I would probably put 2 or 3 coats of white and be very careful about how I apply my brush strokes. I would be very careful about putting the paint on evenly and not letting any of the brush strokes show. But in this case, we want a little bit of variety. We don't want the white areas to be the same everywhere. Now I spray the white and I count to 20. What happens is the water dissolves the paint and makes it liquid again. So when I rub like this, I end up with spots, and that's what I want. So if I don't have enough spots, I spray again. So I spray some more and then I rub again and more spots. That's better. That's more what I'm looking for. Now I need to let it dry. Now in this video, it doesn't show that I let it dry. It looks like I'm doing everything just one after the other, but I'm not. Every color, I let it dry. So now I'm adding gray. And it's very wet paint. You can see it's puddling already as it sits on the surface. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to add alcohol. So alcohol gives you these circular bubble shapes and creates a texture. Now it's done. Now I'm going to add that line and a little bit of spatter. And I have darks and I have lights and I have that line and I don't like just the black, so I'm going to add white lines and just add it like this. Now, because my black is wet, it's mixing with my white. So I flipped the canvas over and I've decided to add some pink. So I'm adding pink in there. So it looks like it's a little more dynamic. You want fat lines, you want skinny lines, and you want thin lines. So I'm going to add the pink on top of the circular texture. And I'm just going to brush it in really quickly, just like that, and water it down a little bit. And spread it around some more. So I want to get close to the lines, but not touching the lines. And I add some of the alcohol. So it creates not only black bubbles or gray bubbles, but also pink ones. And I do the same thing to the other square, or rectangle, I should say. It's not quite a perfect square. And make sure your paint is really wet. This texture with alcohol does not work if the paint is dry. So make sure your paint is really wet. And there we go. I add it and spatter a little bit of pink to make it more random. I like irregular edges, and spattering really creates irregular edges. And now I add the alcohol and I let this dry. And things always dry differently, so it's just wait and see what happens. I'm going to add a little bit of white spatter before I keep going. I really like that irregular white spatter on there. That looks pretty good. And we'll leave it at that. Try not to do too much, otherwise it just looks a mess. Now, I don't like those lines, so I'm using the artist's prerogative. I'm going to cover up the lines. So I'm just taking black and covering all that up. You might have a little texture there because the lines left a bump, but no problem. You want to just get rid of the lines. So that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that it's interesting still. So that white is a little wet yet, and it's smearing my black, but that's okay. I'll just cover it up again. I don't like those lines. I don't like that. It looked too much like straw, and I don't like that part. So I'm going to just paint it out and choose something else and see what happens. I just make sure that black covers really well and the lines are relatively straight. Now I'm going to add more pink. I'm going to make the pink go into the black area. Whoops, I dropped some pink. Remember, you have about 2 minutes tops to wipe it off so that it doesn't become permanent. My black paint is a little thin, so it's showing a little bit, but I can cover that up with spatter. I think I like the spatter better than the lines. It seems to work better with the circular texture in the pink areas. Now I'm going to add white spatter, and that seems to unify it a little better. I'm going to add a little more white. You want the marks to look random, like they're just exploding from that center. It almost looks like a flower even. But I'm going to add more pink, and you tweak it till you're happy with it. And I just keep adding. Sorry about my hand. It's hard to paint with my left. In fact, I can't. So I'm adding lines so that my eye extends to the borders of the canvas. So that line is creating the illusion that my eye is looking all over the canvas. And that's what you want. You want the viewer to look at your canvas and be fascinated by it. So here it is, all dry, a modified frame in frame. I like the spatter more than I like the line, so I'm glad I changed it. So now it's your turn. I want you to give it a try. Try the modified frame in frame.